What expectations should I have about getting a job in such a competitive work environment? All right. How should that guide my efforts in building my reel? Now, I guess, you might be some people who are beginner riggers, and that's one thing. And you might have some people here who are riggers already and are looking to take their next steps. Can you is it the same kind of reel? Or is there something else that we're looking at when you're getting a little bit more to looking at what you do as a character TD?
So, character TDs, riggers are usually always in high demand. But that is good riggers and character TDs are usually in demand. Now, there will, of course, it will always kind of fluctuate. And, after COVID, there's definitely been lesser jobs going around. But what's really important as well, I think, as soon as you get into the show reels and the kind of work that you're talking about and expectations is, I think getting a job somewhere isn't as much about it can depend from company to company. That's going to be my catchphrase.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, they're not always just buying your talents; they're buying into you as well. So it's really important that you can work with people as a team as well. And I think the more that you can sort of show that almost in your show reel as well is definitely good. For me, I really want to see people solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
And well, how do you solve problems and show that on a show reel? Well, it might be a script that you wrote. It might be let's say it might be exaggerated motion on what am I trying to say? If overlapping motion for animators. So kind of time saving things like this, showing that you kind of really understand how to solve issues with that. It might be a script where you're hey, here's where I load in a rig, I can save out the animation, I can click another button and it will cache out everything for me. There's a lot of different things like this, and I think rigging is one of those jobs where it can definitely be tricky to get into, depending on what kind of company and everything that you're going for. And I think that the more that you can show on a show reel that you understand things and that you really thinking it through, and that you don't just have oh, here's this one tutorial that I did and I did exactly that. But if you did that tutorial, or you took some of that tutorial and you implemented it on another tutorial on a rig that you have, all of these things are going to show oh, you understand what you did. You didn't just click the buttons, but you understood what was happening here as well. I think that is really key to kind of stand out from the pack as well.
If I have an industry job already, what should I be doing to enhance my value to keeping my job and getting more responsibility and pay? Because you'd said that there's a high demand for good riggers.
As soon as you are in, that's usually the trickiest part, is just getting that first shot. And then, of course, it can be different from countries to countries as well, and depending on how easily you can move to another country. I definitely the London industry has had a bunch of European artists come in because it's been super easy, right? So that's been an advantage for them. But I think as soon as you're in and really starting to get more responsibility, and with that pay as well, is kind of doing that thing of understanding the pipeline or the process, and really starting to think outside of your kind of your little spot, and not just be this isn't rigging's problem, I'm just going to sit here and be my own little thing. But really starting to understand animation's needs, working with them, potentially provide animation tools, or provide faster tools for them, working with modeling, for instance, and saying hey, how do you guys lay out your topology? It's well, we always do from scratch. Well, what if I gave you a rig where you could kind of match it up to a scan, and then you would have our kind of standard topology snap up to this? I think that's really where that's one way, at least, of doing it, is becoming the higher up you want to go. If you want to go into supervisor level, you need to know all the department's left, right, up, down from you, right? Like really understanding how you finish a project. Now, if you just want to be like a rigger, then it definitely goes into like you're really focusing down on your tools. And I think sort of what you were saying about like showing that you can be like, hey, remember when I did this kind of like human rig and it took like a week? Well, I just did a script that now that same thing takes me an hour or something, right? Or it might just be like, hey, I came up with like this new way of, this is an idea that I have for the pipeline. If we restructure these things to do this, or it might just be upgrading your skills and learning more about information about programming. It really comes down to what you're trying to achieve and what you already know. For some people, it might be learning more art. So if you're already a really good kind of like programmer, very technical, learning like sculpting, like really like even if it's just like getting clay or doing life drawing and just really training up your eye for like giving critical feedback on things, or learning lighting, look dev, and start being a part of like those kind of talks in your company as well. If you're sitting in like a meeting and people are saying like, I kind of like this lighting, but there's something off about it, and you're like, what if we, there's all these kind of different ways to it, and it's something that you kind of like have to feel out. But look for if you can see weaknesses or things that can be improved in your company, or something that you can give to another company. That's something that I think is like when I've been interviewing, like a lot of my kind of the strengths that I've had to like show to a new employer has been my experience from shows and how I collaborated and problems that we solved and how we approached things. And that's what people were really interested in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So basically, what value do you bring? How do you increase your value to the organization? It just seems like there's a lot of different ways to show them, demonstrating with statistics, that you can do something in, what used to take a week now takes much less time. People who are in hiring positions love to hear the idea of saving time, which is saving money, which is making everyone better around you. I think there's a lot of themes to what you're saying there. So that's awesome.